Okay, so we're going to start with our two different colors. So I'm going to choose blue for my first read. And this is a close read of A Teen in a Trolley Reveals Society's Dark Side by Bethany Brookshire. This article is a non-fiction informative piece that was published in 2015. Make sure your name is on your paper. And let's begin, remembering that the first read through is just for understanding. So we have a piece of context here that's giving background information about the article. So follow along as I read the gray box. In 2015, a high school senior named Tiffany Sun conducted a social science experiment and presented her results at the Intel Science Talent Search in Washington, D.C. The results of her experiment shed light on an age-old question: are people naturally good or evil? As you read, take notes on Sun's experiment and how the results support her claims. So I'm going to highlight this question right here because that's what her experiment is answering. Are people good or evil? Okay, starting here with the first paragraph. For context, if you don't know what a trolley car is, we have a picture right here. It's a type of rail car that's in some older cities that's used for public transportation. All right. Washington, D.C. A runway trolley is barreling down a track. Okay, so we already have a vocab word in the first sentence, so I'm going to highlight that word, barreling, which I see here at the bottom means moving fast. It's headed toward 5 helpless people who can't possibly get out of the way in time. But you've seen it coming. If you throw a single switch, you can put the trolley on a different track. Unfortunately, there's someone standing on that second track that will now get hit. What do you do? Throw the switch and doom one person, or do nothing and watch 5 die? Wow, I'm not sure what I would do. Thankfully, the situation isn't real. It is a thought problem known as the trolley problem. Okay, so this situation right here is the trolley problem. Tiffany Sun, 17, used it to explore biases. So we have another vocab word right here, biases, so I'm going to highlight that. And if we look down here at the bottom, there's a note. Bias is a noun. It is the tendency to favor one group or thing over another. Okay, so favoring something is a bias. All right, so she used the experiment to explore biases in people against certain types of appearance, of apparent income, or of disability. Her results show some of our darkest behaviors, but knowing that those dark sides exist might help us fight to counter them, she says. A senior at Roslyn High School in Roslyn, New York, Tiffany presented her results at the Intel Science Talent Search run by Society for Science and the Public. Sponsored by Intel, this competition brings 40 high school seniors here to Washington every year. These young researchers present their projects to the public and compete for huge cash rewards. A philosopher first described the trolley problem in 1967. So that's pretty important. So we have the history of the trolley problem. Tiffany came across it in a class on ethics, codes of conduct for how people interact with each other. So right here we kind of have a hidden vocab word. So we have the word ethics, and then the definition is right here. Ethics are codes of conduct for how people interact with each other. So this is a definition. It immediately fascinated her. There was genuinely no correct answer, she says. Okay, so we're going to flip over to the back. Tiffany thought the trolley problem might be a good way to study biases. So there's that vocab word again. Or the prejudices people have. So there's another vocab word. We haven't seen this one yet. So if we go down to the bottom of the page, we can see the definition is an unfair feeling of dislike or for a person or a group. So we talked about this word prejudice last week. So it's unfair treatment or feeling based off of what? What? Could be skin color. Could be lots of different things. It's based off of something that a person can't change, right? Like skin color, like disability, like their age, like where they were born. So an unfair feeling of dislike or unfair treatment of someone based off of something they cannot change is a prejudice. So I'm going to write unfair dislike based on what can't be changed. But this, I'm sorry, I didn't finish the sentence. Biases are often something that we try to hide. We may not even be fully aware that they color our interactions and decisions. So we can be unaware of our bias. But a scenario like the trolley problem might bring such bias to light. So Tiffany tried an experiment in social science, a field studying how people act toward each other. So we have another hidden definition here. So we have social science, and it's defined as a field studying how people act toward each other. She surveyed almost 300 people. She asked each to decide what they would do in the trolley problem. Would they throw the switch and kill one person, or do nothing and allow 5 people to die? Tiffany varied the identity of the woman waiting on the track. Sometimes the woman was well off, wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase. Other times she wore a waitress uniform. Sometimes she was very attractive. Other times she was plain. And in one condition, she no longer was standing, but instead was sitting on a wheelchair. So these are the different conditions of woman. Okay? And that's important that we note that, because in the next paragraph you'll see the different reactions or bias that people had towards those different conditions. So if a woman looks somewhat wealthy, as represented by the business suit, only 24% of her participants would sacrifice her. But if she was dressed as a waitress, 59% of the people offered to sacrifice her to save the other 5. If the woman was attractive, 44% of people would sacrifice her. The share climbed to 68% if she was plain. And while 54% of people would throw the switch to sacrifice a standing woman, the number jumped to 74% if she was described as sitting in a wheelchair. Wow. So what does that reveal about people is the question that I'm asking. Tiffany is not sure why there were such notable differences in choosing between people who are attractive or plain, rich or poor, disabled or not. But without a doubt, she says, it appears that we as a society tend to view more lives as less valuable than others. What a sobering and sad statement, but the data supports it. So we can make assumptions and generalizations about why people picked one version of the woman over the other, but the data doesn't prove that. All the data proves is how often people were willing to save that woman over the other 5 or sacrifice her over the other 5 based off of appearance. The results don't make our society look very nice, she observes. Still, understanding these hidden biases can be very important. With this information, she explains, we can target those biases and create a more equal society. So even though this information is perhaps not super positive, we can use it to better our society. So she puts a positive spin on the dark data. Okay, so we know what comes next. We're going to break this into chunks and write summary sentences. So we're going to do 4 chunks today. Let's see. So we're going to break it here after these first 2 paragraphs. Oh, and I forgot to switch colors. That's my bad. So to be clear, I'm switching to orange for my second read. So first chunk will end here. So this will be chunk 1. And see how much more that orange pops, and I can organize my thoughts a little bit better now that I've switched colors. Chunk 2 will start down here with a senior at Roslyn High School. We'll flip over to the back. And we'll finish chunk 2 here. So this is still chunk 2, so I'm putting a 2 again, just so that I can know where I'm at. And then let's see. So this talks about the diff leading up to it. Okay, so we'll break here because this chunk down here talks about the results, and this is the setup. So chunk 3 will be somewhat small, and then chunk 4 talks about the results of the experiment. Okay. Alright, has everybody got their chunks noted? Let's flip on over back to the front. So again, you're going to have 4 sticky notes. So we have the trolley problem being described here in chunk 1. Okay, so I'm going to label 1. And we can use this terminology right here. So trolley problem described as a thought problem is used by Tiffany, Sun, to investigate human biases. Okay, so then chunk 2 goes on to explain her project that she was creating for this experiment, then presenting the trolley problem to look for bias, and she changes the conditions of the trolley problem slightly to look at decision-making bias. So I'm actually going to put chunk 2 summary right here so I have more room on my paper. So I'm still on the front. So, trolley problem. Serves as tool for Sun, so I'm just going to use her last name here to expose social bias in decision making. Because she's adding an extra layer to the trolley problem. It's not just who would you pick to die and who would you pick to save. She's adding different conditions, and so there's another layer of decision making added to her conditions. Okay. So then we have the actual conditions of the experiment on 3. So talking about how, so who does she change? Does she change the 5 people, or does she change the one person on the track? The one person, the woman. So in this, then, the woman, make a note here off of my summary sheet, is the variable, and the 5 in the car, the trolley car, are what? What do we call that in the experiment? Variable is the thing that changes, so what do we call the thing that doesn't change, that stays the same? Starts with a C. Constant. Okay? So we have a variable and a constant. So for number 3, by changing the traits of the person on the track, Sun discovered that biases affect people's decisions. Okay? So she discovered that there was a change, right? Depending on what the woman was wearing or how she presented. And then number 4, we have the results of the actual experiment and the conclusions that can be drawn. So for chunk 4, I'm going to write the findings show that biases lead to valuing some lives less, but Sun hopes this awareness promotes change. So we have both the dark data that unfortunately people seem to value some lives over others based off of the results of this experiment, but then we also put in that she thinks we can use this data to create change. Okay, so I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of this text, so I'm not going to read it through a third time, but I'm ready to do my assignments with my notes.